It's good to have some sliced bread on hand when you need a sandwich or a quick snack, but it can be overwhelming when you go to the grocery store and look down the bread aisle and see that there are so many options. Is the $5 loaf of bread really any better than the $2 loaf of bread? Well, let's find out. I'm going to test which breads can hold up to spreading cold butter. I'll test which breads have a good texture. Is the crumb delicate or can it take some abuse? Which bread is the most absorbent? Which bread dries out the fastest? And I want to see how they brown when toasted. At a price of $2.50 is this Bimbo soft white bread. No high fructose corn syrup, no artificial colors or flavors. Soft yet firm enough to hold up to peanut butter. We're gonna test that. 150 calories for 2-slice serving. 2 grams of added sugar. Produced by Bimbo Bakeries USA, Horsham, Pennsylvania. At a price of $2.99 is this Bread Lovers premium bread. White. It's white. 110 calories per slice, 3 grams of added sugar, baked with pride by Franz, made in Portland, Oregon, USA. At a price of $2.50 is this Dunford old-fashioned white bread, 100 calories per slice, 1 gram of added sugar, made in the United States, in Portland, Oregon. At a price of $3.49 is this Grandma Sycamore's bread. Simple ingredients, superior taste, 90 calories per slice, 1 gram of added sugar, made in Pennsylvania, USA. At a price of $4.99 is this Home Pride Butter Top, serving the finest bread since 1957. 70 calories per slice, 2 grams of added sugars, distributed by Flowers Bakeries in Thomasville, Georgia. At a price of $1.99 is this Kroger Classic White Enriched Bread, no high fructose corn syrup, 70 calories per slice, 1 gram of added sugar, distributed by Kroger Company in Cincinnati, Ohio. At a price of $2.99 is this Naked Classic White, 110 calories per serving, 2 grams of added sugar, made in the United States, Portland, Oregon. At a price of $3.79 is this Old Fashioned brand, Healthy Made Delicious, trademark, 90 calories per slice, 2 grams of added sugar, distributed by Maxim's NutriCare, West Jordan, Utah. At a price of $2.99 is this Sara Lee Classic White. No artificial colors or flavors, 0 grams of trans fat per serving, 150 calories for 2 slices, 2 grams of added sugar, made by Bimbo Bakeries USA, Horsham, Pennsylvania. At a price of $3.49 is this Classic Wonder Bread. Soft, delicious, nutritious, and American classic, 140 calories for 2 slices, 5 grams of added sugar, distributed by Flowers Bakeries, Thomasville, Georgia. I thought it would be interesting to weigh each loaf of bread to see how close it is to the weight given on the label. And there was some variation, but they all measured fairly closely to their labeled weights, varying by maybe 5 to 10% at the most. If I do the same kind of test but measure the weight of individual slices, the results are a little bit more varied. Bimbo, Home Pride, and Sara Lee all weigh a little bit more than what was on the label. Dunford and Kroger weigh a little bit less, and the rest are pretty close. And if we compare these weights against the price of the bread, we see that most of them cost about 1/3 of a penny to 2/3 of a penny per gram, but the Home Pride is closer to 1 penny per gram, though the price of the bread will fluctuate heavily depending on where you buy it or if it's on sale. I measured the thickness of slices on each of these, and they generally averaged at about 15.5 to 16 millimeters, with the exception of the naked bread, which is thicker at 18 millimeters. Before doing any testing, I thought I would just feel each of the breads in my hand and see if I could notice differences in the texture. Most of them feel pretty similar, but I do notice that the Kroger and the Wonder Bread both feel pretty light and floppy compared to the other breads. And also the Naked brand is definitely thicker and stronger. To test if it was just the thickness of the Naked bread making it firmer, I decided to cut a slice down so that it was a similar size to the other pieces. And even after doing that, the Naked bread still feels firmer, so it's not just the thickness of the bread, it actually is firmer. I was curious to see if any of these white breads were more obviously white than the other, but they all basically have the exact same pale creamy color. The color of the crust, on the other hand, did vary a bit, with the crust on the Bimbo and Sara Lee being a little bit darker than average, and the Home Pride, Naked, and Wonder Bread being lighter than average. I did my best to do a taste test of all these breads back to back, and it was really hard to note any discernible differences in flavor. I think especially by the time you butter these and toast these up or smear peanut butter on them, they would all taste pretty much the same. The only difference I did notice when I was looking at ingredients is that Home Pride and Wonder Bread, even though they come from the same factory, do use a different sweetener. The Home Pride uses high fructose corn syrup, and the Wonder Bread uses sugar. And if I taste these right next to each other, I can tell that the Home Pride does taste a little bit sweeter. The breads obviously have some varying textures. On some of them, if you squish them, they deform and stay squished quite a bit. On others, they have more resilience and they spring back more like a sponge. And sometimes if you poke too much, it can create these indentations that make an uneven surface, which makes for a very uneven toast if you're making a toasted sandwich. So I want to measure which breads are most resistant to this deformation. I've created this artificial finger compression tester by using a camera on a tripod for consistent weight. I'm going to press down on each loaf for about 5 seconds. The artificial finger is consistently applying about 230 grams of pressure, and I'll measure the depth of each compression with the digital calipers. First up is testing the Bimbo bread. The Bimbo bread is depressed by 4 millimeters. The Bread Lovers has a depression of 7 millimeters. The Dunford bread also has a depression of 7 millimeters. Grandma Sycamore's bread is about 6.5 millimeters. The depression on the Home Pride bread is about 7.5 millimeters. The Kroger bread has a depression of about 8 millimeters. The Naked bread is very sturdy and only leaves a depression depth of 3 millimeters. Very impressive! The Old Fashioned bread has a depression of about 6 millimeters. The Sara Lee bread has better resistance than average at 4 millimeters. The Wonder Bread is by far the weakest and leaves a depression of 10 millimeters deep. I think the takeaway here is that most of these breads are pretty delicate, but you get a little more strength if you use Bimbo or Sara Lee or Naked for the most strength. For another durability test, I want to poke my finger through one side of the bread and see how much pressure it takes to go all the way through. The Bimbo bread pokes through at 172 grams. The Bread Lovers pokes through at 142 grams. The Dunford pokes through at 162 grams. Grandma Sycamore's takes 168 grams. Home Pride goes up to 178 grams. Kroger breaks through at just 108. The Naked bread withstands 358 grams. The Old Fashioned pokes through at 198. Sara Lee at 168 grams. And the Wonder Bread pokes through at just 81 grams. Yet again, when it comes to texture and durability, Naked is the clear winner. Next up is a test to see how well the crumb of the bread holds up to spreading cold butter. The butter is not sticking to the Bimbo bread very well, and I'm experiencing a lot of wear and tear. The Bread Lovers is also tearing up quite a bit. The Dunford bread holds up okay, just a little bit of tearing. Grandma Sycamore's bread is also better than average, with just a little tearing. Home Pride is experiencing a lot of tearing. The Kroger is not holding up very well and is experiencing a lot of tearing. The firmer texture of the Naked bread starts out okay, but eventually wears down and starts tearing quite a bit. Old Fashioned holds up better than average and has just a little tearing. Sara Lee tears quite a lot when trying to spread the butter. The Wonder Bread with its wonderful texture does not hold up to spreading butter at all. Look at this hole. Now that's a lot of damage. While there was a lot of variation on spreading cold butter, all the breads can stand up to peanut butter just fine. I wanted to see if some of these breads resisted staling better than others, so I put one slice from each loaf onto a tray and let it sit at room temperature for 24 hours. And after that time, most of the breads are pretty tough and stale, but there is an exception. The Bread Lovers has maintained most of its original texture. Figuring out how to toast the bread consistently for testing turned out to be a big challenge. I found I was getting pretty inconsistent results from this countertop toaster, so instead I decided to set up a rig in my oven with a baking steel on a top rack and another rack just below. I arranged the slices of bread underneath that and toasted them for about 10 minutes so that they were all exposed for the exact same amount of heat and the exact same amount of time. And the end results don't have a huge variation, but I do see that the Bimbo, Home Pride, and Sara Lee darkened a little bit more than the rest. Sometimes you have wet ingredients in your sandwiches, and it's nice to have bread that won't immediately absorb all that moisture. So I'm going to dip each slice of bread into water very briefly, and then measure how much water it absorbed. And the Bimbo bread absorbed 19 grams of water, and the Bread Lovers absorbed only 4 grams. The slice of Dunford absorbed 17 grams of water. Grandma Sycamore's absorbs 8 grams of water. 10 grams of water for Home Pride. Kroger absorbs 14 grams. 11 grams for Naked. 10 grams for Old Fashioned. 17 grams for Sara Lee, and 15 grams for a slice of Wonder Bread. And we can see from the chart that the Bread Lovers and Grandma Sycamores are pretty low, whereas Bimbo, Dunford, Kroger, Sara Lee, and Wonder all absorb about 50% or more of their weight in water. So which brand of white bread is the best? Well, after all of my testing, I don't think there's an easy answer to that. For starters, it depends on what you want to do with your bread. For some sandwiches, you might prefer the sturdier texture of the Naked. For others, you might like the softer Wonder Bread. One big limitation of experiments like this is it's hard to get a perfectly consistent product from different brands to test against each other. And it's also obvious when you look at the loaves of bread in the grocery store that they're not even consistent within the same brand. Some loaves got a bit better of a proof and a rise, while others are a bit flatter, so there's a huge variation even within the same brand. It's very possible that if I tried to do all of these experiments again, buying all the loaves and testing everything again, I might get different results. I think it might be fun to do this kind of testing on different food products, so if you have any suggestions of what kind of foods I should test next, leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.